So I'm James Norman, CEO and co-founder of Pilotly. So tonight I'm bringing out a set of very kind of well-versed people from entertainment and data. And so I'll just start off by making these introductions. We'll start at the end of the couch. We have Mr. Brian Owens. I've had the pleasure of having him as a friend over the past 6 months or so. He is the former president of Red Bull Media House North America and former EVP CMO for Red Bull North America. So lots of experience there. Widely recognized as one of the world's most aspirational content lifestyle brands, Red Bull has a lot of content around it. So when you're talking about content development, advertising, media, as well as their blend between sports and culture, this was the CMO behind it. And he used a lot of different insights to make a lot of decisions. He oversaw the development and production of the feature films, the television, all of their properties, all the way to the live music festivals. Before joining Red Bull, he's had a career that's covered strategy, marketing, innovation in general. From Nestle to eBay, but most recognizably for some people in here, was a VP of marketing at Fox and led the primetime programming marketing for pop culture shows like 24, Glee, Fringe, Simpsons, Family Guy, and others. So over 20 years of experience in the space, has been seen as one of the top 100 marketers in the US, and in 2009 founded Consiglio Group to bring his knowledge base to other creative thought leaders in the space. So, why don't you guys give a warm welcome to Brian Owens. Next, we have Melba Benoit. Man, we've had some times. I'm sure everybody's had their times with Melba. She's held senior executive positions across a variety of broadcast and cable networks. She's delivered strategic direction and content creation, product strategy, marketing, and advertising for major media companies that you all know, like Disney, Comedy Central, Cartoon Network, NBC, Fox, and Nickelodeon. Currently, Melba is working with Dialware, which is behind the world's first mobile dial testing solution, and is an executive professor in digital media innovation at Pepperdine School of Business. And beyond all that, also is the founder of the Marion Dupree Group, which is kind of a thought leader in innovation, insights, and solutions for companies such as yourself. Shoot, I forgot she does more. I don't know how she does all the time. She runs an art gallery, which is cool. I'm very much into art. And she also is on the board of Neighborhood Partners, which is a nonprofit organization whose mission is to create affordable housing and economic development for underserved communities. So, one more warm welcome for Melba. Carlos. So me and Carlos, new friends, but good friends. Met recently, but very interesting background and just kind of like, I already know this guy's my tap into things when I gotta do international research. So Carlos is a leading mind in strategic planning and consumer insights, most recently supporting Netflix as a director in consumer insights. He has been involved with technology development and advertising at a variety of companies, including Viacom, Carré, Saatchi, Walter Thompson, and others. He's also the founder of a Think Punk, a research group that is focused on international research and understanding people in different cultures. And for the last 20 years, he's had an acute focus on getting that deep understanding around multicultural audiences and translating what people want to communicate to people in different places to a language that is meaningful, whether it be through creative development, content development, or adjusting the messaging. So why don't we give a warm welcome to Carlos, and we'll move on to the topics. So just kind of want to start off the bat. Most people in here are researchers, so we're going to kind of start ahead of the curve and just kind of dive right into what are some key data points, not just particular like quantitative data points, but what are some key points of information that you need to collect data around to surface specific insights in the space that you've been in. So for example, if you're talking about a television show or a short form piece of content to engage people for a brand, or something that's gone international. Can you speak to some core elements that you look at when it comes to research?
Well, obviously there is the natural data points, no? From ratings, from
all the metrics performance about viewing, time spent, etc., etc. But lately, what we discovered is that when you start looking on data points of what people do in their free time, it was key for us. So because we didn't realize that we are competing, I'm talking about Netflix and all of the service. They are competing not just with the Amazons or Hulu's, et cetera, et cetera. They are competing with maybe Candy Crush, or they are competing maybe with just regular face-to-face conversation. So data points about how people use their free time, it was one of our key data points.
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely chime in real quick on that. Like, that's a key thing to think about when you talk about people's time spent. Back when you did research in a traditional format and there was less channels available on television, it was less relevant because a major source of entertainment was the television set in the living room. But now with displays everywhere, there's so much activity going on, whether it be you spending time on social media or just even maybe doing FaceTime with your friends. Those things have to come into consideration when you talk about the capability of your show to captivate someone's time and get them to take an action to continue watching over time. It's not just like, did they love that show? Do they even have time to watch it? What day does it come on? Things of that nature. So.
Yeah, no, it's interesting when you put it that way because time has not changed. There's still only 24 hours in a day, and the amount of time that you have to watch content hasn't really changed either, which is kind of interesting. What has changed is that because content is on platforms that can move with you, is that it feels like you spend more time consuming content, just not in one place, right? I was noticing on my kid's phone, my youngest daughter's phone, it tells her the activity that she spends on her phone, how much screen time per week, which kind of freaked me out a little bit, given how much time she spends on her phone. But thinking about your original question, so the data points that we think about is basically how the consumer feels about the content that we've created. So we start with appeal, then we go down to some form of time spent, meaning was I able to keep you engaged long enough? Do you want to come back to it? Do you want to come back to the next one? Would you recommend it to someone? So those are the ones that we start with, and then we go from there.
As a marketer who's often a partner to the research teams and analytics teams and data teams, we're looking to absolutely understand the first component that Carlos mentioned. How are people spending their time holistically, not only with our content, but also with other things that are in their world? When I left Fox and joined the team at eBay, there's a VNOC at eBay that looks at all the data that's in the ecosystem at any given time. And the one data point that we saw that had a blip in our kind of tracking of some key metrics was actually when American Idol was on TV, ironically, which is the brand I left before. And so you're looking for these major interactions that consumers have with different things that are stealing time. Because to Carlos's point and Melba's point, we're all actually trying to steal time from consumers and give them something valuable for that time in return. But as a partner to Melba, for instance, at Fox with her team, I was also very interested in data that would help me understand the audience and preference in addition to time and engagement and some of the other things that might have been present. Because as a marketer, we're trying to figure out how to potentially partner with other people that own some of their time to bring them closer to the brand that we're creating. Or we're trying to figure out how to optimize the messaging or the marketing or some element of the brand or the show to try to figure out how to make it better for the audience. And so a lot of what I've tried to do working with Insight partners is really make sure we're unpacking the data around the consumer and trying to go as deeply as we can into their life, not just in terms of time, but as much as we can understand. Their likes, dislikes, their political affiliations, the cars that they drive, the brands they prefer. Like marketers increasingly have to have thousands of data points on consumers in order to get to the insights that support developing content or marketing content. And over this past 10 years, I've really seen that accelerate in the amount of data that we're looking for, but also then the simplicity that it requires when we get that data back.
So speaking to that, like, I remember some conversation where Melba was just like, big data. Like, it's in the way. Like, what is all this information? So definitely want to kind of circulate back around here and talk about like, okay, we're collecting all this information to get to some of these core points that were just discussed, but what tools are being used and how are we simplifying that information to make it actionable? Like, what are some techniques that we're using to take different sets of information and make it actually useful for the organization?
So, since my name was called, there's some place on the internet you can hear me saying data shit, because it just, the more data, the more data. There was this drive with the onset of analytics that the more data I have, the smarter I'll be. Big data sort of assumes that we haven't used data to make decisions. We've always used data, it's just now it's coming in a different format. So what's been interesting is as we've gotten further and further into analytics, we've forgotten the other part of what happens with analytics to actually get to decisions being made, and that's actually how you use insight, because no company can operate on hundreds of insights. Usually 2 or 3 that they can actually move on, and companies come in with 15 insights, and then they're frustrated because the company will only use 1 or 2 because they can only usually act on 1 or 2. So it's the storytelling around data and then understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. Because many times you don't need all the data points that you're collecting, you just happen to be collecting them. So with measurement, you only really need to know what someone's watching, when they're watching it, how long they're watching it for, and maybe one other data point. And that's it, and you can actually transact off that. So it's sort of a different way to answer that, but that's sort of where I start.
Yeah, it's very curious that you mentioned about the concept of big data. I'm going to quote Professor Dan about what he thinks about data. It's like the sex life of a teenage. Why I'm saying that is because everybody is talking about it. Nobody is really doing it. Everybody feels like the other one is doing better than you. So that's the word of big data, right? It's like we face that like a data, and how we are collecting. And we need to face a truth. About how we collect data, we can spend hours and hours talking about it. How accessible is that? Is different. How much money, how much resources we have in our companies to really collect that data is completely another league. So that's what I'm very agree with you about, like, let's focus on 3 metrics. Let's try to find the 3 metrics that you need to focus on, and then forget about the rest of the big data. The challenge is what's going to be the 3 metrics, right? Because we cannot standardize for every single business or for every single company. Is viewing, is average time spent, is sales. I don't know. It depends of where your product is, where your brand is, in what stage you are, is the metric that you're going to use. And maybe when you accomplish certain goals, then you are ready to move to the next phase and then start using another three metrics. So that's the way that I see big data.
I would just echo a bit of what I said earlier as a client. Actually, I'm going to play the client role on this panel. We have so much other data that's coming from so many other parts of the business that the biggest gift you can give us as a partner is very clear things that we look at consistently that we use to make decisions. Melvin Carlos hit it right on the head. The more, like, it's almost like no one wants to see your big data. It should live in a black box, but the magic that comes out of that black box should be very crystal clear, really actionable, and help us actually move something forward. You very rarely have somebody sitting as your partner who actually wants to go deep into the data. Sometimes you'll get that, but it's actually more rare on the marketing side than it is in other parts of the business. So whatever you can do to be a good partner to take very difficult things that might exist and be driven by regression algorithms and all this, the hard math that's underneath, the more you can take that out and make it very simple for your clients and your creators, and that's when you really get to a win.
It's like that you're so excited because you worked on this data visualization and this infograph, and you run in and you bring it, and people look at you and go, yeah, but what does it mean? Just tell me what it means. And that's an actionable insight, but the graph? Yeah, no, not so much.
I feel like she's looking at me right now.
Yeah, and James, sorry, I kind of interrupt. I mean, I would like to also take this conversation to the next level. Yeah. What means, but also actionables.
Right.
Because the dashboard looks beautiful,
Right.
and I can tell you, look, my dashboard, mobile, blah, blah, blah. So, and what am I going to do with that information, right? So I think that the actionables, that how we really implement or make some kind of progress on the information that we get is key.
Yeah, definitely agree with that. Like, especially when it comes to figuring out what are your 2 or 3 core metrics that you're building your data up towards. It's important to think about the context you're in. It doesn't matter if it's content, you got to think about the context it's in. So like when I'm having conversations about stuff like this, I like to think like, where's this content going? Is it broadcast television? Is it cable? Is it SVOD? Are you doing a direct consumer type situation? Like all those different situations require different key metrics, and people have to think about that as you decide what data you're going to collect and what actual insights actually tie to outcomes. So I think it's about kind of refocusing and understanding like the outcome you're looking for. And maybe the outcome on television is this continuous viewership week over week. But the outcome on a subscription platform like Netflix is you keep paying me. I don't really care if you watched anything. So you have to rethink the way that your actual metrics work. But with that said, can you guys, I feel like, I'm not sure if we mentioned this, but any tools top of mind that you have used that, seem to be interesting to you in terms of collecting some additional, getting towards your actual insights?
Yeah, I mean, many tools from passive tools, from like collecting data, asking to the consumer directly, or just measuring wearable technology, facial coding, et cetera. Yeah, I mean, the way that we are being collecting data, it's endless.
And so outside of the tool set, when it comes to looking at the data in the US, how do things shift as the market becomes more international, right? So as people who've been programming domestically for years, their companies begin to have more of a global footprint through, global licensing, which Netflix has kind of led, put the first forward on for that. How does research shift with that in terms of like understanding the data points in those different markets and getting to actual insights?
Well, that's a very, very interesting point.
Question, but-
Yeah, no, because it's something that I face every single day. Let me just start with, there is 2 big pillars that I see this. First, everybody's talking about social conversations, right? The social sentiment. Even when you go with countries that just speak Spanish, you feel like you are managed to read all the conversations, you're gonna be able to get the feeling. And it's not true, because even between countries, Mexico, Argentina, or Spain, the same word has different meaning. So social sentiment is very difficult to read. But if we also go to the facial recognition, where in Brazil, people tend to be so expressive and express emotion for every single thing, like, yeah! When you go to Asia and Japan, say like, yeah, and they are feeling exactly the same sentiment. So that part is so difficult, no? So that's why standardize or find ways to adjust, to calibrate the way that we collect data is also very, very important. So yeah, it's something that we face when you work in international markets.
So you say like maybe market to market, you should be kind of figuring out maybe different markets, there's different things that drive them to take an action. So maybe you have to recalibrate some of the things you're looking for.
Yeah, and in the recalibration, you have to take in consideration the context.
Right.
And not just the context about, because one of the big mistakes that we here in the States do very often is like, we think like our content here is what's gonna resonate there, and we forget about to check what locally is resonating. And believe me, every single content has country has a very good local content that reflects political situation, reflects family dynamics, et cetera. So I think that we should really consider the context as a number 1 element when you are recalibrating. Obviously, maybe silly things like weather. Like if it's snowing in a country, why people are consuming more time in certain months on the other months. How people feel because it's raining every single day. So things like that is also you need to take in consideration and put in this machine to adjust or calibrate the way that you think about international.
Yeah, I think the context thing is super interesting. Like, obviously, we live in a country that's like very privileged, and our lifestyle is very different. And so, like, when you look at different countries in terms of the life they're living on a daily basis, what kind of content do they want to consume at the end of the day? when you live in a place with political unrest or like low economic social status, things like that. Like, what is the difference in terms of the type of content you're willing to consume? Like, more often than not, in the past 20 years, like U.S. is producing way more like 60-minute dramas, right? And like things that can be super depressing, that might not travel, right? Like we used to produce a whole bunch of 30-minute sitcoms that could go anywhere. Everybody wants to laugh. So like I think context is very important to think about when you think about the international market.
I think going forward, the other thing I would encourage you to do is borrow from outside the industry. I spent a lot of time in consumer products. I spent a lot of time in media and entertainment. I went and did a stint up in the Valley in technology on purpose because actually technology companies and content companies are more siblings than they are cousins. You both deal with lots of data. You both try to engage consumers. And as you see a hybrid company like Netflix, who is actually foot in both worlds, there's some things that the team at Netflix will think about because of its first foot in tech that would be very different than what a pure content company might think of. And your kindred spirits are absolutely going to sometimes not feel like your usual suspects in terms of learning how to think about insights, dealing with massive amounts of big data, and making sure that those things become actionable in terms of what actions you take. I'd encourage you all, if you don't, to think about how to spend some time with some pure tech companies who are really working. It's very strange, but they're working on exactly the same problems, just in a different context. If I took you up to eBay, we would talk about users and stealing time and telling great stories with engaging narratives and creating content and trying to get you to data that takes action. The action that we're looking for, though, is for you to make a purchase as opposed to make a watch. But the process of unlocking those insights that those other industries have gone down in this past 10 years and kind of fully embedded with new technology, I think would be really beneficial to people that have had a chance to do that maybe in a different space. So I'd really encourage you to look at tools from other industries, look to partnerships with other industries, but most importantly, both of the themes that I just mentioned come down to just communicating with the other people that are working in insights around you, outside your circle, and then in those kind of companion, sibling, or cousin industries.
I don't know if I can follow that. I like that, yeah. So the things that I think about to remember going forward is that content is content is content. It is all content. Advertising is content, video content. We're creating content right now. And the key in media is about growing audiences and what you know about those audiences and how you understand those audiences using data, but using content to capture those audiences because that's basically what you're selling. If you're in an SVOD or in a subscription business, it's still about understanding the audience because you're trying to get a transactional relationship with them. But on my side, on the traditional media side, you're selling eyeballs. You're not selling content. And so as you think about that, how you get to transact around the data inside of your organization through communicating, through engaging storytelling, basically gives power to how active, how much money is invested in research, et cetera. So that's the thing that we have to continue to think about because that's what gets you to the next place of really interesting research.
Agree, and agree. No, I'm kidding. No, so basically, I would like to invite you guys to think punk. When I create a company, I call it think punk because we have to allow ourselves to think punk, right? Think different, to think out of, I don't want to say out of the box, out of the triangle, out of the circle. Let's think different. For many, many years, we've been thinking about preferences of the consumer, right? So first, the consumer doesn't care about data. They don't care about stats. They care about things that connect with them and emotion them. So let's stop thinking about preference because if we, just think about it, if we create a Stranger Things test and we ask the consumer, do you prefer this content? They'll say, no, I don't like it. It's a strange concept. So when Netflix created Stranger Things, don't even consider the consumer preference. Come up with an idea that we thought like I'm gonna attract consumers, but the consumer was not in the first place. So when I invite you guys to think different, it's like, let's think about the consumer, obviously put the consumer first, but it's better if we evaluate the emotions. And thinking where data gonna go in the future, the way that I see it is, let's start connecting data with emotions. Data tells the what, we need to keep doing our traditional research to understand the why. technology is racing. I'm gonna meet there because one day our watch is gonna measure our sleep. They're gonna know if we have a good sleep. So maybe our alarm, if we have a really bad sleep, our alarm gonna be something soft because they're gonna start preparing us for a tough day. And also maybe our phone gonna connect with our agendas, and they're gonna see if it's a difficult day or it's an easy day, and they're gonna connect with our social media networks, and they're gonna see if we post happy things, and our hashtag was "I'm so happy" or "Look at my food" or "Tough day," or maybe I didn't publish anything that day, so I was so busy. In a way that the learning machine gonna start knowing more about me and connecting emotions. Meanwhile, we got it to that point, let's keep doing things in the way that we know it, and let's don't forget that machines are there, but our experience is important, and connect with emotions is more important.
That was a good little wrap up there. So there's, just to give my little future piece from the technology standpoint, I've come to the mental conclusion that like, you need a set of tools to get to these like key points of measurement that we're looking for. You need a set of tools, and so like as much as Pilotly continues to build what it's building, we're going to begin like integrating other excellent companies into our platform that we feel like provide value. So whether or not we're integrating the people like Fuel Cycle to make it accessible to the lower market, or if we're working with people like Canvas, Fox Pop Me, people like that to integrate into our platform to provide additional context to that data. I believe it's going to be a confluence of tools in the next few years that's going to make it accessible for anybody to do the kind of research that we've been talking about here. So I want to thank everybody for sticking around for the conversation. I appreciate you guys having a good time, and there will be drinks, and there's a porch out here with a beautiful view, so please enjoy yourself.